So hello and welcome to the lecture on how to write your explanation essay. So I just want to take you from the content library, and just over here we've got skills. So you have a set of areas there that can help you out with constructing your essay. So, and this lecture will be sitting in here, and we've got a couple of tips down there, but the most important thing is to be able to understand the marking key. So you've just completed your inquiry and now you're looking at planning your explanation essay. This marking key that you use and that will guide how you structure and plan your essay is the one you'll also use next year. So once you get the hang of it, hopefully it will be something that you can just kind of pick up very quickly when you're doing these. So when we're moving away from inquiry, we want to look at creating an essay with a strong argument and also very good evidence. Now that might mean you might not use all of your sources. You just want to use the best ones that are good for your argument. If you are a good writer, then this may be an easier thing for you. If you're not, there is ways that you can still get marks and just be very clear and use it like almost like a formula, and that I can help you with. Okay, so what you're looking at first is basically the marking key. So this is how I mark. So if you want to know how I mark, this is what I have to use as per SCASA. So you can see here we've got each section has a particular possible mark you can get. So the introduction is a possible mark of 3. The narrative, which is almost the story of what you're looking at that will go throughout. The essay has a possible mark of 4 out of 25. What you're going to notice here, the argument and the supporting evidence with 6 and 9 means a total of 15 out of 25. So really these two areas here are the most important. Everything else sort of works past that. And then we've got the conclusion, and that of course adds up to 25. So like any rubric, you've got a high 3 out of 3 and you've got a 1 out of 3. So really it depends on, what you're aiming for. It is absolutely possible to get 3 out of 3 in this, as long as you kind of stick to the formula. And there's little tips over the side that we'll go into as well, but I just want to go through this first. So in your paragraph, you want to make sure it's related to the area and the topic. You've got to have an understanding of the focus and key terms of the question, and you've got to give a clear sense of the direction of the essay. That doesn't really kind of give you a lot of information, so that's why later on we'll have a look at how that then translates into what you can do. You would need a thesis statement, which you already have in your proposition. You need to define any key terms to show your understanding, and you need to outline your main points. We also look for a little bit of context to help orientate your reader, and I'll look at that later. That's worth the full 3 marks. Introductory paragraph, if you give a few sentences outlining the theme of the essay and you have a very simple proposition, we'll give you 2 marks. But if you're really only very general and it's a very brief outline, you'll get 1. So a synthesized narrative is almost like the events of what's coming through. So in that, you are looking at possibly the series of events that are in your topic. You need to show how they interrelate, and that's between events, people, ideas, and you're looking at your short and long-term change. So if I can see that understanding within your essay, then you can also get a 4 mark there. If it's just simple, that you're not really understanding how events and key people come together and also how they might unfold, even in that sort of date order, then you're only going to get 1. Okay. We can have a little bit more of a conversation about this. Please come and see me if you're not too sure what this means. But really, I suppose, in very simple terms, it's the story of history that you're creating. Now, what tends to happen, in my experience, the narrative, the understanding of what is going on, the order it happens, that actually is pretty much something that most of you are good at. However, it's only worth 4 out of the possible 25 marks. So what I'm finding is that will often take over and you will sacrifice your argument and your supporting evidence. And there's a few simple ways you can avoid this. To get a top mark in the argument, you want a sustained, which means you want something that goes throughout the essay, every single paragraph. You want a sophisticated argument, and that will look at how you write as well. And you want to show that analysis. It needs to be analytical, logical, and coherent. So your argument must build from the first paragraph down to the third and make some kind of sense. Making judgments on these events in history or these people and their impacts and backing them up with evidence. So you can actually get a whole 6 marks on the strength of your argument. Now, you've got to look at argument and evidence together, because if you have a strong argument but your evidence is weak, then that's not going to work out. Okay, so that means that you will actually get a less mark there. They work together. Okay, you can't have an argument that is logical and coherent without good evidence. You can't have really good evidence without a clear argument. So this 6 and this 9, the possible 15, do form the bulk of your essay, and they all make or break you in terms of marks. So what we're looking at here at the top is a detailed, accurate, and relevant evidence. And they're your keywords. The keywords is relevance. So your evidence has got to be relevant to your argument. Okay, now you might have collected a fair bit of evidence, but you might only have a little bit that actually is relevant to your argument. Your inquiry will show me that you've researched well, but I don't have to see that in your essay. We want some variety, but we really are marking it that on the premise of its strength in your argument. So you want to use and cite modern or appropriate sources to develop or strengthen arguments. So I don't need a lot of evidence. I need good evidence that's going to support your points that you're making. And that's really the key point there. It does not have to be lengthy quotes that you must remember, but they must be quotes that are nice and short and direct. They could be quotes, they can be statistics, it can be talking about a cartoon or a visual source, maybe it's talking about propaganda, but it's got to relate to your point. Okay, so if it's one good source per paragraph, or example, that's 3. That's all you need. So just make sure in that selection. And if you're not too sure and you want to show me a practice essay, that's absolutely one of the best ways to start learning about this process. Most people, sometimes you'll get the lucky few that will jag this and understand it. Most people sit around here and around here. So you've got relevant and accurate insight evidence is provided, but it might not link that well to your argument. Mainly accurate and relevant evidence. If quotations, sources, statistics are used, they are cited in some fashion. So it links fairly clearly. But what you want to do to get that top mark is have clear argument, nice and sophisticated, supported by relevant evidence that really helps to show that argument or where you sit in the debate. Okay, so that's the bulk, and that's really where your attention at this point wants to go, and that can be a bit tricky. So again, come and see me. Now, this is an interesting one here because it can be quite vague. So 3 marks, drawing the essay's argument or point together. 2 marks summarising it, and 1's just based on its general focus. To get the full 3 marks, what you need to do, summarise your thesis again, restate the argument, summarise very quickly your main points, and you want to kind of draw this together, what we call in history using a powerful statement. So at this point, that can be a further thought, maybe a further implication, a comment as well, a personal comment is not too bad, but you want to make it in the third person. But again, it's just kind of a powerful statement that drives your point home or allows for further thought on the issue. Most people just get 2 for this. It is a bit of a skill to work through because most of you are pretty good with summarising the essay's point of view. So if you're not too sure what that might look like, again, just give it a go and I will give you feedback on it because it will depend on what your topic is. So that's the marking key there, and you'll get one of those every time, and I'll circle it and I'll have annotations in your actual work, but your final feedback will go on to sector that will then go through to home, so you need to make sure you go check that. Okay, so I've got 2 things down the side here that might help you construct one. I'm going to go to this one here that we get from our waste guide, our history waste guide. I'll just pop at the top. So here's some tips. Okay, so you are looking at this in terms of your inquiry validation, but you will also have in your exam and every explanation task, the essay is the same. Timed essay, eventually it's without notes. You do start off in year 11 with notes, so don't stress out about that. But it can be an unseen question usually, or a choice of questions, depending. You know your question, which is awesome on this one, and we tend to take that into account with marking as well. So what you basically want to do here is your first thing is look at your inquiry question, your proposition, and actually work out what you need to prove. Most questions require that you show what you know and you can apply it analytically. Okay, so there's just some sort of, we're looking at things like evaluating, assess, examining, accounting for. You will actually see them in essay questions that you'll get. Okay, so you might get evaluate the proposition that, assess the extent to which Cornelius Vanderbilt affected the US rise of capitalism. Examine the situation in Nazi Germany and analyse its impact. Account for the actions taken by Roosevelt in his New Deal. So we have those there. They're mostly lately evaluate, assess and examine, I've found. Okay, so you want to make sure that you understand the question and the proposition. So there's a few tips to make sure you avoid. These 3 here, so avoid sweeping statements, avoid oversimplification and vague statements, avoid exaggeration. They are the key things that will undo you, and they are the key things that people make consistent mistakes on. So all people think this. No, be specific. If you have a historian, you name them. Just their surname is okay. It might be, you're looking at a particular situation. You want to make sure you get names or surnames. Whatever you can get in that detail is better. Don't simplify your events. You can't wing this. You've really got to have that clear evidence and really know what you're talking about here. So that is something you need to avoid. Don't exaggerate. Don't overinflate your statistics. Don't make these kind of, big exaggerations like, like Rockefeller is had the most, hang on, sorry, I'll just rethink that one. It might be something like Rockefeller was the only capitalist that really made a difference. And he is the one industrialist that we would still look up to today. That's very exaggerated and not always the case. So you've got to make sure that you avoid these big statements. They tend to happen when you haven't done the prep. So just make sure you keep an eye on that. Okay, you need to plan your essay. And you do, even if you won't know the questions, you need to have essay plans for practice and things like that. It's really one of the best ways to do it. There's no shortcuts with this, sadly. It's really just planning, thinking, and getting it through. Okay, so what you need to do is you can use these down here to tick off. Excuse me, where you're at. So your introduction needs to have some kind of context or background in it. So which time frame are we? What's our topic? We need to set the boundaries of this time limit. Now, you might be studying you might be looking at a smaller period of time. Later on in exams, you look at whole periods of time, or you look at the whole unit sometimes as well. So when you get a very general question in your introduction, you're setting the boundaries of your topic. So if you're looking at 1850 to 1900, you'll set that boundary. Okay, so you get to do that, which is quite a clever way of narrowing your focus so that you're not having to put absolutely everything into your essay. If you've got any key definitions or people, you have got to define them. Okay, so usually you would do this sort of after your thesis. For it could be a main idea, it could be capitalism, it could be communism, it could be a key person that you're going to identify. In the inquiry, it's robber baron, it's captains of industry. You've got to define it. And if earlier on you were just putting those definitions in, that's what you need to do. Your thesis is clear and clearly explained. State what you're going to argue and clearly refer back to this throughout your essay. Outline your essay. What are the major points going to be? So that is really how you can do it. Now, there's a couple of ways that you can set it out. You can start with context and you can do a little bit of background about your person. It's a nice way to open, but it doesn't have to go there. You can start with a nice opening statement and go straight into your thesis. That's not a problem. And you can come back down to your context. But if you're getting stuck with how to start, context is a nice way. What are your background events? You know, if we're looking at a key person, how did they start out? You know, where were they born? So simple things like that can just help you get started. Probably better off to put the key definitions after the thesis, okay? Because that really is then, you know, gives your reader a really good idea that you know what you're talking about, and then you can outline your main points. Okay, each body paragraph should have one key idea, lots of supporting evidence, quote starters, dates depending, a clear topic sentence, it outlines the information. You need to be direct, don't overwrite. Don't waffle. It's not a lit essay. It's just a nice, clear, direct history essay. Yes, I want to see a nice vocabulary, but I don't want an actual, English or lit essay here. Demonstrate your knowledge. Apply it to the question. Don't wander off task. You've got to make sure you're linking everything back to your argument. Don't just write this narrative. Don't just write the story of what's going on. You need to refer back to it's got back to your question here, but really it's back to your thesis. Your thesis is based on the question. That's why it keeps saying question. But you've actually got to demonstrate that you're answering the question. It's one of the key things I look for. And if I don't see it, you'll have that there as an annotation. Make sure you try and look at both sides of the issue. Even if you're arguing more strongly for one side, show in subtle ways that you've still considered the other side of the argument. It just means that you're actually, making good judgments there. Keep your language formal. Make sure your key names and your events are spelt correctly. Now, there's nothing worse, nothing to annoy your marker more when you really incorrectly spell key things. Sometimes a little bit of spelling mistakes here and there is not going to hurt, but key events, ideas. So you don't want to misspell capitalism for this. You don't want to misspell the key names of the presidents, and you don't want to misspell the key names of the people in your inquiry. We are assuming that you've done the research, you've looked at it enough to have that. There's no excuse for poor spelling when you have bringing a planner in, which is what you're doing for the first one, because that is, you can copy and paste that over. You've got a spell check. If you're not too sure of a spelling, let me know, okay? Make sure you get enough time to proofread. All right, so then we come down to the conclusions. You need to restate your thesis, sum up how your essay answers the question to make your links very clear. Draw all or the major points of your response into one or two powerful statements. Don't repeat the introduction. Don't make it vague. Try not to make it sound like an afterthought. Easier said than done when you've got a timed essay. Okay, can be quite tricky. And it's normally that we don't leave enough time at the end for that. That, I think, will develop with a bit of practice. I've also got another one here that was from a Year 12 revision called the Magnificent History Essay. So it's just another way you can have a look. So basically, just going straight up here, the Magnificent History Essay. All right, step 1, prepare. Step 2, read the question, read it again, underline the keywords, see what clues you can gain, check for instruction words, and then read the questions again. So it's really understanding what your essay or your question is asking you to do. Okay, what does it want me to discuss? How does it want it to be structured? What is the time period covered? And who am I being asked to write about? Because you'll often be asked, writing about people is not unusual in history. People and events, of course. It's really what we're all about. Take some time to plan. What key content, information, analysis answers this question? Then you can begin writing. Now, when you see pithy, pithy is direct and not the waffle that I'm talking about. Direct, to the point. Brief yet forceful and to the point. Okay, the introduction has to reflect the question. Use the key words of the question in your thesis statement. And really your thesis statement is making that judgment. What do you think about it? Now, you're not going to write, I think. You're going to make it a nice little formal statement, but that's really what we're asking you to do. We're asking you to make a judgment. And then you can set the scene. Where does the story begin? This is your background information. So that's a nice kind of way to bring it together. Your supporting paragraphs, you have your topic sentence, you've got specific information that relates to the question. If you've got buzzwords that you've seen, and we know robber baron, captains of industry, account for, perspectives, analysis, all those things you put in there, there are history buzzwords, and there's lots more that you'll come across as you go. So that toolbox will sort of get bigger. And I'll show you where you can see some straight away. Explain these points of analysis and connect it back to the question. So all this sort of stuff in the middle here is your evidence. Conclusion, bring your essay together. Emphasize your main idea. Include a so what statement, and maybe include a forecasting statement, which is what's going to happen next. What do you think is going to happen? Or, if things had kept going, what might have happened? So really, that's what you want to look for there at the end. Do not write in first person, okay? Write in third person. Never use I, because it's not our story. It's someone else's story that you're looking at. Do not write all I ever knew about a response, okay? It's called the buffet essay. Do answer the set question. Don't just throw everything you know in there as a last resort. That's not going to get you through, okay? Engage with the question is better than throwing everything you know in there. Do not give the marker the impression that you cannot write in standard English. So you must avoid slang. You must keep it formal. Do use correct spelling and grammar. Include your packed capital letters. There is no excuse for spelling keywords of the unit incorrectly. Now, just ignore that. This is for a Year 12 unit, but it's very true. You might have complicated names. You need to make sure you know those things, you know places, you know the ideas, you know those key theories that we're looking at. Fail to prepare, prepare to fail. I think that's very clear. So hopefully that will kind of help you as well. Okay, so just one last thing and then I'll let you guys go. Explanation and communication is one of them. Okay, and glossary, we come down here. These are the questions that you might be looking at. So if you're a bit stuck, you might want to have a look at, so for instance, you've got perspective down there. I know we're having some trouble with that one. Evidence. So these things I'm talking about, you've got some glossary down here from SCASA. Significant, so that's assigning importance. That's really a good thing to think about as well. And I'm just going to pop into